Growing up, I was quite the shy kid. I was just always lacking a sense of confidence, and it made it hard to present in class and even make friends. That wasn't until 10th grade when I realized I needed to make a change. So I started to force myself to talk to new people and present even when I didn't have to and didn't feel like it. Before long, I was full of confidence. I was so full of confidence that I thought I could do anything, including curate an art show. I mean, what kid thinks at 18 that they can curate an art show in New York City? Well, I believed I could, and I pulled it off somehow. Confidence can take you a long way if you're willing to let it. In today's episode, I speak with an artist who had to find their own confidence if they were going to find true happiness within this world. This is the Myartisreal podcast, a narrative journey into the lives that shape art. I'm your host, Jacob Johnson, and this is episode 30, Andrew Scott. Right after the break. This podcast is fully independent and produced by me, Jacob Johnson. If you enjoy the show, please spread the word and let others know, and consider leaving a review or a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you, and back to the episode. Born and raised in Rochester, New York, Andrew Scott was known as the art kid.
I used to get home from kindergarten and just go straight to my room and just draw. I think it was that was kind of my outlet. Like, you get stressed and just draw. And I would just constantly be drawing. And it's interesting, because now I can't draw anything unless it's something, like I said, that has a plot twist. I don't want to draw if it doesn't have something interesting going on. But back when I was younger, you just draw anything that you would see. And that's how I got sort of my pencil mileage in, was at a young age, just kind of drawing anything I would see.
As a kid, Andrew was very shy and would use drawing as an escape from the real world.
Yeah, I'd say some artists, I think they draw a lot from their struggles, and the only struggle I had, I'd say, was just being very introverted, which is where I think I turned to art early on. Probably 5 years old is when I found my kind of peaceful place in just drawing and diving into just this other world of creating things.
So were you able to make any friends growing up, or was it always difficult?
No, that's definitely was always a challenge. I think it's the case with a lot of artists, but I'm definitely a solitary person. Definitely was growing up, and art was definitely like an outlet and sort of like a companion. That's how I would spend my time growing up, was drawing, and diving into just this creative world.
While art was a big part of Andrew's youth, as he got older, that need to draw faded away. He started to play sports, and through that no longer needed the drawing to relax, but turned to basketball.
I actually sort of stopped drawing around 13 or 14, for about probably until I was maybe 27, 28. So there was a stretch where I didn't draw at all, half my life pretty much. And when I started to get back into it, I remembered, I'm like, do I have the skills to do this again? And I would think oh yeah, you were the art kid. You had it, you could do it.
Art didn't simply fade out of Andrew's life, and suddenly at 27 he picked back up the pencil. For starters, it didn't ever truly leave. And this feeling to be creative was always with Andrew, lingering there, waiting to be needed. So when you were growing up, when you were getting ready to graduate, kind of what was your... Because I know it's always like, hey, you're turning 18, you're graduating high school, you got to decide what you're going to do the rest of your life, sort of, which is insane. But what were you thinking at that time?
Well, I knew I wanted to do something creative, because I still identified as a creative person, whether or not I was even creating anything. So I went into advertising. And it's actually interesting, because the reason I went into advertising, and specifically copywriting, was because I always loved print ads, like super visual print ads, like in magazines. Just the ads where it's like a visual plot twist. There's some kind of clever visual communication. and I thought I want to make print ads. And I don't know why I didn't go into graphic design or illustration, but I went into copywriting, and I was like, I want to make print ads. And it's interesting because I went into a writing career knowing that I wanted to create these visual ads. So it really didn't make much sense. I mean, like you said, you're 18, so you don't make the smartest decision. So I went for advertising at a local college here in Rochester, and I knew that was a creative career that was also practical. Advertising jobs are easy to come by, but I could have an element of creativity. So that I knew that much, and that sort of was my focus, and remained my focus for the next 10 years, really.
Society often puts these expectations onto us, whether it be from teachers, friends, or family members, makes us feel like we have to follow a path. Go to college, get a job, marry, have kids. You know that whole thing. Andrew was very much in line with this way of thinking. He thought once he had picked his path, that that was all he could do, and there was no changing it. And how was college for you? Were you outgoing then? Were you playing any sports then? Or was it just kind of, show up to class, get your stuff done, graduate?
More of that.
Yeah.
Same thing, same theme. Just kind of stick to myself, and yeah.
So how are you feeling at that time in life? Do you remember feeling happy or just kind of
No. I think up until, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, I had always sort of felt like just floating along. I didn't know. I kind of felt like I didn't have much say in where I was going. Um, Even in college, when you're deciding where you're going with your life, I just felt like I had made my decision, and I was just going to be going into advertising. And even though I was like, teaching might be a great job, I just didn't think I had the ability, or I don't know. I didn't think I could just switch things up and do that. I just was like, well, this is where I'm going, and I'm just going to kind of float along with the current here. So that's kind of how I felt, definitely at the time. This was where I was going, and I didn't have much say in it.
Do you know why you felt that way? Why do you think you felt like you kind of didn't have a say, like once you made your initial decision?
I think that was just sort of a result of the way I had lived my life up until that point. I think it was a self-esteem thing. I think I was always just very sort of kept to myself, didn't really, attack or chase after things with passion and like fearlessness. I think I just kind of wanted comfort and um just normalcy, and I just didn't really I wasn't an assertive person. So I think it was really just more, like a confidence thing. It was like, well, this is just kind of, you make these small little moves. You don't do drastic things. You don't, go for a big change, and you keep things safe and which you're familiar with. So that's kind of, yeah, that's just kind of how I was navigating through life at the time.
And what was kind of your goal at that time besides graduate? Did you have like I don't know, like a timeline of like, okay, I graduate high school, I graduate college, I get a job, then I do this. Was that kind of how you were living?
Yeah, that was it. It was like next step, get a job. Um, Next step, go to the 9 to 5 advertising job, and that was my goal, and that's what I did for a very long time. And I was definitely feeling sort of trapped, and just I just felt very stuck in corporate America.
Have you ever heard of the movie Office Space? I sure hope you have. Well, if you haven't, it's basically about a guy who feels trapped in this extremely mundane, repetitive office job and starts to try and break out of this corporate world. Well, Andrew is in a similar situation. He is trapped and didn't know how he was going to get out of this, or even if he could. In the beginning, working in the cubicle, he wasn't sure how to feel.
And I eventually became sort of resigned to the fact that like that's just how it is. Um, you're just gonna have to work this job, and that's I kind of accepted that, and I wasn't as sort of antsy. I mean, I like to equate it to like breaking a horse. Like when you get into corporate America, it's like It doesn't feel right when you first start. You're like, man, really? I sit in this cubicle and I do this every day, 40 plus hours a week. Like eventually it becomes what you do and what you are used to.
We are about to enter Act 2 of this story. Andrew is trapped and trying to find a way out. His desire to be creative has never left him, even if he put his pencil down all those years ago as a teenager. While this office job does seem boring most of the time, he does have projects that come his way that scratch that creative itch, and he goes from being the art kid to the idea guy.
I would, live for those moments where a job would come through and they'd be like, "We need to come up with a campaign idea," and they'd be like, "Andrew, you're our conceptualizer. You're the idea guy." I was the art kid when I was younger. In advertising, I was the idea guy. Everyone knew I was obsessed with ideas. That was the one part of the job where I was really into it. Not so much, not making ideas for art, but it was ideas, still just these big ideas that I really, that was the part of the job I loved, but it was never enough. So I did feel unfulfilled. In those moments were kind of few and far between, where you would have that fun aspect to the job where you could just sit down and concept and brainstorm and dream and kind of jot things down. And the cool thing is, I think I really worked that conceptual ideation side of my brain in that job for so many years, where I think creativity is like a muscle where you can get better at it and stronger with it, and the more you work it out. And I think it that really did shape me as a conceptualizer and someone who can think of ideas. And then when I applied that to the art world, um, I think that was kind of where my strengths really aligned. So I am grateful for that time in that job, because it did help me shape the conceptual side of my brain.
Like Andrew said, these small bursts of creative projects wasn't enough to satisfy that itch. So he ventured into some freelance work for various nonprofits, helping them come up with campaigns and posters.
So I actually started to do pro bono, I was calling it, work for just different nonprofits, where I would pitch like poster campaigns, and then I would work with artists to create them. So it was like African Conservation Foundation, I think it was, and we did a poster campaign about certain species that were about to go extinct. So there was I can't remember the specific species. It was some sort of rhino, some sort of elephant, some sort of gorilla. And I worked with this crazy talented 3D illustrator he created these really complicated and intricate balloon animals representing each of these species. And then we had like a hand with a needle coming in to about to pop it. So it was just sort of this poster campaign of these crazy, like these really cool looking balloon animals, and then with some message about, gone in an instant, things like that.
And while it was more fun for him to work on, Andrew still wasn't the one creating the images.
So I started to try to scratch that itch by going outside of my day job and working with artists and illustrators to sort of create these forms of visual communication. That was really that was my outlet. I was like, this is kind of scratching that itch. It was kind of interesting because I never considered just doing them myself, because I hadn't drawn in so long. So I was literally working with other artists to scratch my own itch, and I hadn't put it together that I just need to do this myself. I just felt like I couldn't. I felt like I had chosen my path as a writer. I had abandoned drawing for 14 years, and I couldn't just do it.
This went on for some time for Andrew, constantly trying to find a balance between his day job and his creative itch. Soon, life would throw him a curveball that would throw him off his plan and force him to shake things up. COVID hit, and this job he had spent so much of his time working for had to let him go.
Finally, when COVID hit, I was furloughed from my agency, and I was definitely very disillusioned with advertising. I was very upset because I didn't know what I was being thrown into during COVID without a job and no guarantee of return. And I was like, I never liked advertising. Why don't I try to start drawing again? And I was, for a couple months, I was going to be on unemployment. And I'm like, I have the time. So why don't I just start to draw again? So I started to draw. I started to take courses to kind of like, knock off the dust.
And it turns out that COVID was not the only thing that gave him the push to start taking his life back into his own hands.
I don't want to get like super into personal details, but it was, I think, around 27. I had just I came out of a marriage. I was divorced at 27, sort of, overcoming a real sort of habitual drinking and just feeling very trapped and knowing I was at a low point in my life and I had started to draw at that point, but um, it was really going through, steps of like recovery from drinking and being sober for a while and building up my confidence and getting back out into the world and out of this marriage that I was in. And it was really then that I started to realize I had control over my life and I wasn't just floating along. I had the ability to choose what I could do with my life. And it was really a combination of that sort of gave me that confidence and I'd say I started to make goals beyond art, even at that time, and in meeting those goals and just working through things personally. I think art was sort of the, I guess, sort of one of the benefits of that, making those changes within myself. I think the art thing kind of it wouldn't have happened. I don't think it would have happened if I didn't sort of work on myself and build up my own confidence and realize like I could choose things. I could choose to become an artist. I could choose to set goals to be in a gallery. Like I think that's really it was a personal change that enabled the artistic goals to be met as well.
What was holding him back for so long was not having the confidence within himself. You might not believe it, but confidence alone can take you far and often ends up being the singular defining factor on if you actually achieve your goals. A lot of artists stress about putting their work into the public eye to begin with and worry that it won't be well received. But gaining that confidence to show your work to the world is the only way you'll ever know for sure if you can be an artist. Finally, Andrew is gaining confidence and is back with his pencil in hand. But what path will he take now?
Yeah, I just started to get into it, and my initial goal was to get into editorial illustration, um, and that was sort of what I was pursuing for maybe 6 or so months. And I started, posting stuff on Instagram, and they were not my current channel, but my earlier one, and it was just editorial stuff. There was a lot of political unrest at the time, so I think a lot of it was just motivated by that. So I was just, coming up with visuals in that vein. And yeah, so I was doing that for 6 months, and then I started to talk to editorial illustrators and get a sense for the industry. And I'm like, this is just going to be another advertising job again, where it's corporate America. You have to be doing what someone else wants you to be doing. And I was like, why don't I just make art for fun? So I just decided to just go back to my like initial style, just with a pencil and graphite, and just kind of like just go from there. And I started to do that.
He saw what was going on and knew he wouldn't be happy in that advertising world. Okay, great. A step in the right direction for him to find happiness. So he started to post his drawings to Instagram and was getting great responses, and before long would be featured in an exhibition.
I mean, I think I was maybe a couple months into doing that, and there was someone reached out, and there's like, hey, you should probably enter your piece into this local show. It was a small works show, in some little town nearby, and I submitted two pieces into that, and they both got accepted. And I remember at the time that was like meant the world to me, getting into this little gallery show. Um, and then they did like an award, jurors' choice and best in show in that. And I remember thinking, like, man, this piece I have in there, like, it's such a good idea. People will love it. And I'm like, if the juror has a good sense for like what a good idea I got a chance. And then I got, like juror's choice or something. And I remember just like being like, man, that was like sort of the validation I think I needed, because early on, getting back into illustration and art, you know, I wasn't super confident. I didn't really know how I would stack up to other artists, and getting that validation of like, we liked your piece. That was probably our second favorite piece in the show. That really lit the fire under me to be like, maybe I could do this. And I just went from there and really just kind of started going into it. And I just fell in love with it. As soon as I started making art instead of, editorial illustration.
First, Andrew picked back up the pencil. Then he got the confidence to put the work out there. And now he has gotten enough support from others to know that, hey, maybe this art thing can be something for real. Of course, the bills have to be paid. So while he was making his art and having fun doing it, he did take a job back in advertising to keep the lights on. So when you went back into advertising, but you had this art on the side, were you feeling less trapped because you had this outlet now?
Yeah. I definitely felt I did that creative itch like I was describing earlier. I was scratching it. I didn't feel that sort of like antsiness and discontent, because I had this other outlet. So I was able to kind of get that out of my system. It really does, for me, like creating does feel like almost like this, just it's just this thing that you need to get out of your system, or else it's gonna like eat you alive. So like for me, not doing art for so long was killing me. So yeah, when I was pursuing art on the side while working, I did feel a little more content, I'd say. Just knowing like, okay, I can get through this. My day job has its perks. I do get to come up with ideas from time to time. But yeah, and now I get to do this, my true passion outside of work. So I definitely felt more balanced and content.
So were you having goals to make your own art your full-time job?
I don't think I was super optimistic about. I mean, it was always a dream once I got back into drawing to draw for a living, but it was never. It was like It was very much a dream. It wasn't something that I thought was ever going to happen. Um, so I think I was just sort of, again, resigned to the fact that like, okay, I work in advertising and it is what it is. Um, but I did have a supreme confidence in my ideas. Like I knew my technical skills weren't where they needed to be, but I was like, I really did, and it's gonna sound cocky, but I did think like when it comes to ideas, I could go toe to toe with like some of my favorite artists out there. Like I can think of ideas. That's always the one thing I'm super confident in. So I knew I had something that was in. I knew I had some kind of, again, I don't, it sounds obnoxious, but I felt like it was a world class sort of skill, the ideas, which is weird to say at the time, just because I had no reason to think that, because I had no outside validation telling me that I had great ideas, but I just felt it. I just was like, man, I got something here. So there was a little bit of me that believes that I could turn it into something, I think. And then, yeah, so I just continued to work on my art as a hobby. And it was sort of like you'd set little goals here and there. My first goal was to do a public show, did that. The next goal was to do a solo show. I did that.
Whoa, wait. He got a solo show? That's a pretty big deal, actually. How was it getting that first solo show? I know that must have felt great.
Yeah, that was awesome. It came off of, winning that juror's choice at the one show, and then I had posted about it, and someone had seen that, and they just offered me their space downtown in Rochester at like a little space that no one's had a art show at. They were just like, well, you have an empty space if you want to fill it for, a couple months. So I sort of like, they just gave me the space, and I just kind of like tried to do my own promotion for the show. And I remember I bought my own, vinyl to put it on the window of the thing to make it seem legit, like this is a real show. And I'm trying to, promote it with the other galleries around to try to really, it was sort of like I needed to sort of initiate everything myself, because it was just sort of like they threw me the space and they weren't going to like do much else other than that. But I was super excited because I was like, man, I can just literally I can do whatever I want with the space. And like I said, that's where I was like, man, what could I do? Knowing that I had to fill the space and I had to put these frames here and here, like what could I do where the frames are interacting with each other or something like that. So that's really having that space is what unlocked that new direction.
Did you catch that last part? Here, let me repeat it for you.
What can I do where the frames are interacting with each other or something like that. So that's really having that space.
This is the part I couldn't wait to get to. This idea to manipulate frames of his works is what changed everything for Andrew, and it's even how I found his art in the first place. But what he didn't realize was subconsciously he was breaking these characters out of the frames they were put within, just like he was breaking out of the path he had followed for so long. His goal in his art had always been to have what he calls a visual plot twist, but this was the first time he was experimenting with making the visual plot twist more interactive.
I don't even know what sparked it exactly, but I just had the idea of having two frames next to each other, and the sort of the subjects interacting with each other, whether they're trying to like get to each other through the frames, or I hadn't really quite thought it through all the way, but I was sort of like, oh, I really want to have these frames interacting somehow, because to me that was like sort of the ultimate, visual plot twist. And from there, it became like, initially I was going to have the two subjects interacting across frames, which honestly I never even kind of cracked that idea. But it led to, me thinking like, actually, how could I have the subject just interacting with the frame itself? And then some. I think I initially was thinking would be, I'd have a character kind of interacting with the side of the frame, and then I don't know what sparked it, but I was like, maybe I could have it breaking the glass.
Then he shared one of these glass breaking works online, and it just went viral.
Yeah, yeah. So the first one that blew up was I posted my original slingshot with the kid with the slingshot, and that really took off. I posted it as a video, and I actually accidentally posted it as a reel. I didn't even use reels at the time, and I was trying to post the video, and I selected reel, I guess, and it started to go viral. And I was like, okay, now the thing that I was really into, this frame stuff, also apparently is very popular if I just post the process of it. So I just kind of dove headfirst into like, how many ways can I do this? So the pickaxe was pretty early on, where I broke the bottom of the frame and kind of hid the rest of the pickaxe underneath the lip of the frame and broke the lip off so that it revealed the rest of the pickaxe, just sort of creating that illusion. So that was definitely a super popular one early on. So
he knew as soon as it went viral that he needed to capitalize on this moment in case it never happened again. And when you started having these artworks kind of go viral, what was that like? How did you feel?
It was crazy. It was definitely, well, it was interesting because, like I said, I had that irrational confidence, and I honestly, when I first posted the broken glass piece as just an image, I think that was like in 2020, and it only got like, I don't know, 80 likes at the time. The reaction that this video got was more in line with what I thought that was going to get back when I did that. So I was like, all right, I am validated. I like, people do think my ideas are great. I've always thought my ideas are great. So it felt very validating, very exciting. And then it was sort of just a whirlwind. I mean, it was a very strange feeling to watch it sort of unfold. And then I just knew like I had another piece that I had created a little earlier with a kid sliding down the edge of the frame. And I was like, I got to post that again. And I just got to figure out an interesting way to bring it to life in a reel. So I hung the piece up on the wall and I had it sort of jerry rigged. So I was going to come in with some metal snippers and flip the wire. And I did that, and the thing swung down, and I posted that, and that started to do well. And then I just really was like, I'm going to keep doing these reels and riding this wave. And I just sort of, it was a whirlwind. It was hard to sleep. I was very anxious just because I knew I had an opportunity, and I knew I needed to sort of seize the moment. I was like, if I kind of stop, I think this opportunity is going to pass me by if I don't put the necessary attention and energy. So I knew that was sort of my moment to to make this art thing happen. So I just really went after it. Yeah, I haven't really stopped since.
And so, are you a full-time artist now, or do you still have another job?
No, like, I am happily a full-time artist now. Um,
So when did that happen? How long into making art again did it take for that to happen?
well, I honestly didn't start seriously considering it until July. Um, but I didn't actually take the leap until about 2 weeks ago. So I am freshly
Really?
a full-time artist. Yes.
Was that nerve-wracking? Like, how did you feel leaving the job, that kind of security blanket?
That was definitely scary. And it definitely adds a new pressure to making art. But the overarching, like the overall feeling I have is just excitement and gratitude. And I am just so ready and have been just drawing and making ideas and having the space, the mental space and energy to just commit fully to art it is a dream come true for sure. So I'm loving it.
What are kind of your goal? I know you had goals before of do a solo show, that sort of thing. What are some goals right now?
Right now, I'm trying to find my routine. The freedom to just be able to draw and create is incredible. I'm probably working harder now than I was when I was working two jobs, just because I'm just sort of I have this freedom now where I can just do it whenever I want, and I am doing it all the time because I love it. But my only goal right now is to just I'm focused on a show for next year with Stowe Gallery. I did one in June of this year, and I'm just sort of putting pieces out there and creating pieces, and I'm going to take sort of a body of work, make that available at my show in June with Stowe. So my goal right now is just sort of on that show next summer, and it's just going to be an online show like it was last year through Stowe Gallery. So that's sort of my focus right now is just creating the best pieces for that show.
It was confidence and self belief that allowed Andrew to break free of that corporate box he was stuck in. Still, he doesn't regret the time he spent working in advertising, as it has given him the time necessary to build that ability to create cool concepts. Before, when Andrew was drawing as a kid, it had no real meaning. It was all just for fun and to have an escape. Now, his art is so much more. It's an outlet to express himself and a way to convey meaningful messages. And of course, it became a way for him to pay his bills at the same time. If you're feeling trapped in your day to day life, I hope you can find comfort in the story of Andrew's and know that there is always something that can be done. You just have to gain the confidence to try. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Myartisreal podcast. This podcast is produced, edited, recorded all by me, your host, Jacob Johnson. Support for this episode comes from our Patreon page. If you enjoyed the stories of the artists I tell and want to help me grow this show and increase its quality, please consider signing up for our Patreon page at patreon.com/myartisreal. I couldn't do this without all of you. Thank you.